Well, cue Country Roads as the West Virginia Mountaineers win the return of the Backyard Brawl, beating Pitt 74 to 59 in Morgantown. This is the WVU and Pitt post-game show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, the Backyard Brawl post-game show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, Pittsburgh Sports Now, and WV Sports Now. I'm going to be joined by Alan Saunders of both those two networks, who he was there in attendance. He was there in attendance with our two colleagues, Ethan Bach and George Michalowski, covering the game in person from the Coliseum. I'm your host, Mike Asti. And Alan, thanks for joining, man. I know it's easier said than done sometimes joining from location, and we're delaying your trek to one of the 17 sheets in town, probably on the way home. Maybe I do recommend the non-gas station sheets if that's still there, because that's a great trivia question as the only one around. But West Virginia was able to eventually pull away and the spread and get a convincing victory, as they were expected to do as the better team. And Bob Huggins had to stare at them a few times to get them back on track, but they were eventually able to get the victory. Pitt, though, did keep it close early, and turnovers kind of just unraveled around them. West Virginia eventually able to take control, take advantage of those turnovers, and get the win. Before we get your thoughts on West Virginia, and I do want those since it's the first time I'm seeing them this season and even the rest of this game, what did Pitt do early to allow them to be making this respectable early on in this game? And then what happened to allow West Virginia to make this what we kind of all expected and get a double-digit victory?
Yeah, I think, early on, Pitt was able to use its size advantage, which it does have, maybe not a deep one, but when you look at Pitt's starting lineup with John Hughley and Mo Gee as 6'9", 6'10" guys, I don't really think West Virginia has a real answer for them, especially on the glass, on the offensive glass, on post-ups and things like that. And so I thought, early on, Pitt was able to use its size advantage and, clean things up around the rim. And it was an ugly game early on. There were a lot of broken possessions and things like that. And Pitt was able to kind of take advantage of that. I think Hughley getting to foul trouble really hurt Pitt. And then I think West Virginia's point guards were able to really, really impact the game defensively. I think what happened as we go forward from that beginning, maybe what it was about the first 6 or 7 minutes of the game, where it was maybe still a 1-point game either way or something like that. After that, West Virginia started to speed Pitt up. Pitt started to turn the ball over, and they didn't have that size advantage because Hughley was playing with 2 fouls or he was out of the game. Jeffress was playing with 2 fouls or he was out of the game. He got 2 fouls. And then, there wasn't the cleanup man to pick up the pieces when Pitt started to get out of control at the guard spot. I thought they really got Femi Odokali off his game. He's not a big turnover guy over the time that he's been at Pitt, but I think he had 8 or 9. I saw him get the job done. And I just think this is a Pitt team that is not experienced enough to play fast yet. They're not together. They're missing pieces. This group doesn't have that much chemistry. And I thought, West Virginia really, the 2 guards to me was really the key too, because it wasn't just one guy. It was the fact that West Virginia could roll out, through a whole shift of really impressive defense, and then turn the page and just go right back to it with another one. I thought that was key. And then the last thing for me for West Virginia, Sean McNeil is a player that Pitt doesn't have, and a player that Pitt doesn't have an answer for. He only scored I think maybe 10 points in this game, but they were hugely impactful.
He had 11.
11. Every single one of his baskets felt like a dagger. He got left open. Pitt lost track of him, and he just doesn't miss when he's open. And Pitt doesn't have a player like that. So there's no answer. Like, Pitt's not going to get or make open threes, or honestly really even take threes. So when you have a guy like that, where it's just like, oh man, that one's in, it was really a momentum builder for West Virginia, I thought, when he was able to contribute offensively.
Yeah, McNeil actually had 11 against Oakland, 11 in this game. He was the second leading scorer in that game, the third leading scorer in this game, which is better for West Virginia because you have those three guards and all of them into double digits in this victory. West Virginia does get the Backyard Brawl win 74-59, or Alan Saunders joining me here on our Backyard Brawl post-game show here for both Pitt and WVU. Before we get more to the Mountaineers, I do want to ask you, because this was kind of the chatter on social media, even though Pitt lost this game, and again, they did keep it kind of close early, West Virginia not taking advantage of the turnovers. And the one problem for the Mountaineers that I don't think is going to allow them to go as far as some are projecting them and is going to hold them back. And Ethan and I talked about this in the preview show. We talked about this on every show about this season, really. They don't rebound well enough. They actually lost the rebounding battle in this game. That's going to be a problem. They don't have a big with all these guards. But on the Pitt end, they did keep it closer early, and then eventually West Virginia pulled away. It seemed like, and certainly is the case, it's not too hard to go up from where they were game one, that Pitt certainly played better, certainly improved themselves. It sounded like Jeff Capel was happy with his team's play versus what they did against Citadel. So anything that happened in this game, because it is too a team that does have some high hopes this year, despite losing by double digits again, that Pitt could take this and get more competitive, that Pitt could take this and improve upon this, regardless of Horton, regardless of what's going on, that Pitt did show they are better than the Citadel result.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of made a joke in my tweet of the final score. Either we're to assume that the Citadel and West Virginia are equally as good, or Pitt played better in this one, because it was second straight 15-point loss. I think Pitt played a lot better in this game than they did in their opener. I think they can play better. I think that's actually maybe the more encouraging thing is that not only did Pitt play better than they did in their opener, I think they showed that they can play even better than they played in this game. They got contributions from people that looked just lost. And I mean, I thought Nate Santos was, again, really promising. I mean, that's two straight games where he's not lighting up the score sheet. He only had 5 points. But he's a freshman, and this is a big environment. And it wasn't too big for him. I thought he played well. I thought Mo Gee was more like the player I thought he would be in this game after really having a dreadful game against Citadel. And Will Jeffress, I mean, he didn't make a lot of baskets, but he got to the free throw line, and he was active on the boards. His shooting is still a struggle, but if he's going to have some 0 for 7 games like he did against the Citadel, he's got to have games like he did tonight where he hits 4 free throws, he gets 7 rebounds, he has some assists, and he's kind of filling up the stat sheet in other ways. Even if
eight points is not bad at all for him to have 8 points.
Right. So if Pitt had gotten 10 from Gee, 8 from Jeffress, and 8 from Oladapo, that's a completely different game against the Citadel. And I don't think Hughley and Femi Odukali were as good against West Virginia as they were.
I was going to say, if you give Hughley's effort from Citadel to this game, that's a close game.
Right. So in this one, Hughley's limited by foul trouble. I think Odukali got pestered by a couple of really good defensive guards that not every team they play is going to have. So I think Pitt's done 2 things. Pitt's played better, which, I mean, we knew they would. Maybe not in this one, but eventually.
Yeah, right. It's hard to not go up from where they were. Right.
But they also, I think, gave you some hope, right? They gave you something to wish on, at least, where you think, okay, well, if we could just get Hughley's game from Citadel and Odukali's game from Citadel, and then this game from Gee and Jeffress and Oladapo, starts to look like a productive group. I mean, they're not going to go out there and make the NCAA tournament, but they're not going to be embarrassing either. And I think the first game was certainly embarrassing. This result was much more in line, but I think this was ahead of expectations for Pitt.
Yeah, I mean, there was a while, and granted, it was very early on, that West Virginia fans were sweating it out a little bit because, again, if they get cold and they miss some shots and they don't rebound, that's clearly been evident now. They are going to be vulnerable. They're going to lose some games. They are probably going to get upset a game or two this year, and this could have been one of those, but eventually they did take care of business. West Virginia ended up being too much. On the West Virginia side of things, Bridges with 18, Sherman with 17, McNeil, as you mentioned earlier, with 11. and it ended up being too much on against the Pitt team that just couldn't get it in offensively and even had lesser of an offensive output than against Citadel here. Alan Saunders here joining me as we're talking Pitt, West Virginia, the Backyard Brawl. WVU wins it 74-59. You'll see the coverage on Pittsburgh Sports Now and WV Sports Now, the game recap from George Michalowski and Ethan Bach on those two sites respectively. And we'll get some video reaction here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Now, Alan, flipping the script to the Mountaineers, you're sitting there in Morgantown. You didn't get to see West Virginia against Oakland because you were covering Pitt against Citadel. You now saw West Virginia up close and personal. Joe Lenardi is saying Sweet 16. Others are saying they're going to miss the tournament. They don't have a superstar. They have the third leading scorer from last year needing to lead the charge this year. Bob Huggins ties Bob Knight, so obviously he's going to get the most out of his guys. What do you think of this West Virginia team? Still early in the year, you know they're going to tweak the lineup and get better. They always do under Huggins. But what's your current assessment now that you saw them up close and personal, granted against the struggling Pitt team?
Yeah, I think they're obviously flawed, but still dangerous. There are going to be teams where just the matchup doesn't work. They don't have enough size to really play with teams with good bigs. I think about, back over the years, some of those Iowa State teams, for example, that had those two big guys, or some of the Kansas teams that play with a lot of bigs.
I mean, too bad Culver's not on this team.
Right. I mean, give them John Hughley, and this is the Final Four team, maybe. They just don't have anybody that's gonna be able to bang with the teams that have really good bigs. Everybody else, I think they can play with, because they're going to be a disruptor defensively with what they have, not just with those guards, but those wings are tough and strong and physical. And I love the way they play defense. They didn't press. It wasn't a full court press, but it was a speed you up. It was a speed you up from the very minute you got the ball. And that's going to hurt teams. It hurt Pitt. I know that. It's going to hurt other teams too. That is not a fun thing to play against, and I like I like that. They gave up a good field goal percentage against Pitt. I mean, Pitt shot well, but it was mostly those ones that they can't defend anyway, right? It's all they finally beat all the hard pressure, and now it's like an easy layup by the big guy. But the big guy's going to make that layup anyway, right? Make him work to get the pass to him, make him work to get the ball inside, and make that really, really difficult. And I think they're onto something. Oakland's a good team. Beat Oklahoma State tonight.
Yeah.
And they made them look pretty pathetic on offense. I mean, West Virginia didn't shoot the ball well in that game, and that's why it was close. But they really shut Oakland down on offense. And now Pitt, again, this is not a good ACC team. But Femi Odukale was a all ACC freshman type of player last year, and he turned the ball over eight or nine times, 8 turnovers, and had 7 points. I mean, when you're the point guard has more turnovers than points, I bet you lose 100% of the time. I can go look them up, but I think that's a winning recipe for West Virginia, and there are going to be teams that can beat that recipe with specific parts and pieces, but there are a lot that will not. And so, a flawed but very good is my estimation of this West Virginia team.
I think that's a fair assessment. Flawed, but very good. They're going to be competitive. They're not going to be easy to beat. They could certainly make the tournament. They could catch teams napping and go to a Sweet 16 because guard play usually takes you there in March, but not having a big, it's going to be hard work. They're going to have to hit some shots, and I don't know where the rebounding is going to come from. So they definitely are flawed, but they're very, very good. And you mean to tell me that a point guard, despite what he scores and he turns it over more, that's a bad thing? Maybe a little joke of what's going on in the NBA with Russell Westbrook. That's kind of the problem right now. But that definitely is an issue. You mean to tell me? Yeah, at all levels. Crazy thought there. Does Pitt get that first win against NC Wilmington? That's the next game for the Panthers. WVU also has a mid-major opponent coming up. These two teams actually, after coming from the brawl, as we wrap things up here, they both have a lot of mid-majors coming up. So it's not murderer's row for either team next week. That maybe Pitt gets that first win. Maybe West Virginia can stack some wins before the schedule then does get more difficult, as they both clearly need to improve upon some things.
Yeah, Pitt has Wilmington and Towson, and I think they should be favored in both of those games. Those are two pretty poor Wilmington's rebuilding, and Towson's not been good for a while now. And West Virginia's going to tournament in Charleston, South Carolina. They start with Elon, but then they've got Ole Miss or Marquette, and those are teams that are,
they're pesky.
Probably a slight step up from where Pitt is right now.
Right.
Certainly St. Bonaventure's in that tournament. They could see them in the championship game. Clemson's in that tournament. They can see them in the championship game. Those are two really good teams. Bonnies are one of the best in the A10, and Clemson's a middle pack ACC school. So those will be good tests for this West Virginia team, and I think they're going to beat up on. This is a perfect team to go play these tournaments, because you start playing 3 games in 3 days, and that defense, that's gonna. This will be a better tournament team. Talking about this kind of tournament, or the Big 12 tournament, or the NCAA tournament, this will be a better tournament team than a regular season team, I think, because of the way they play defense and the way they make other teams expend energy that they may not have.
Right. That's a Huggins team right there. And Huggins likes these in-season tournaments. He likes to have a difficult schedule early on. He likes these opportunities, and he usually does have a team that gets better down the stretch. Maybe not in recent years, but usually the case. So yeah, that might be how some are thinking, okay, maybe they could do something in a tournament, in a Big 12 tournament, in the NCAA tournament, if they would get there. Maybe that is the thought process there. Alan, I do appreciate the time. I don't want to hold you up any longer. I will tell you that it's too bad that Ruskin Musket's not still in town, because that could be right past you on your way home there in Sunnyside. That's open till 4 a.m. So I know how late you work with these games. No matter how late you go, you could have hit Ruskin Musket, but unfortunately, rest in peace to Ruskin Musket, no longer there. The Mountaineers do get this victory, winning the Backyard Brawl, the return to the Backyard Brawl, 74-59. Just quickly, the atmosphere there, did it feel like a rivalry game? You were in Morgantown. It wasn't in Pittsburgh, where the vibe's not really that great around the basketball program, but it is again around West Virginia.
Yeah, no, it was great. Student section was great. They were loud. The place was full. It got physical at some points. Everybody was, there was a real emotion in this game. I don't know where it came from, since these guys know each other from Adam. It's not. But there was definitely, I think it was mostly that a lot of these guys, so you're talking about every freshman, obviously this is their first big Division I game, right? Every sophomore spent their whole freshman year playing in front of empty arenas. So I just think,
yeah.
And even like a guy like, Taz Sherman, who's kind of like a been there, done that guy. I mean, it's been a couple of years since now he's been in a situation like this. So I just think everyone was amped up. Everyone was ready to go. The arena and the environment made it a better game, and it was fun, man. I came into this with very minimal expectations for Pitt, but I was entertained by this basketball game. It was fun to watch, and they really went at it. I mean, this is a good quality effort and intensity, the kind of thing you want from a rivalry game. I thought both of those teams delivered that.
Yeah, and it is also cool that Heather Lyke, Shane Lyons, Bob Huggins, Jeff Capel, everyone around these programs, they made it very clear they want this game. They don't care who's in what conference. They want this game because of what you're describing. It probably also is for the best that this return to the Backyard Brawl was in Morgantown this year, with everything going around the Pitt program. The atmosphere there at the Pete might not have been to this level.
It would have been exactly this level, because it was an all West Virginia fan.
Well, okay. It wouldn't have been, maybe that's correct. It would have been, the West Virginia fans would have just traveled and it would have been the same level. But it was cool to see it there and get an early season sellout. That's not always the case for West Virginia as well. You don't get the player connection at all, nor really even the student body connection at all. But hey, if they're going to be into it, they're going to be into it. So that's a cool thing. It's a great rivalry to have, and certainly an historic one. And West Virginia does get the victory in this edition of the Backyard Brawl. Alan, I appreciate the time. Safe travels with you, George, and Ethan. And we appreciate the coverage and the time, man.
Thanks, Mike.
Our Alan Saunders there of Pittsburgh Sports Now and WV Sports Now, as he was there in attendance, along again with George Michalowski and Ethan Bach of PSN and WVSN, respectively, covering this game. They had a trio there. It was deserving of that. This was a quality, good blowout. Oddly, this was a blowout victory for the Mountaineers. They eventually pulled away and got the blowout win. they got the win that they wanted. They covered the spread. Little close for comfort early. They couldn't take advantage of those turnovers by Pitt. 19 turnovers, I believe, at halftime. Pitt just turning the ball over way too freaking much to have any real chance in the game. It was one of those games that you're watching it, and you knew that Pitt was not going to win this game, even though it was still at one point within 12 points and WVU missed a shot or two, but you knew Pitt wasn't going to win the game, and they don't, and West Virginia eventually pulls away. Taz Sherman, similar production these first two games. This is more of a test than Oakland, even though Oakland's a better team than Pitt, just because it's a rivalry game. You're at home. You could feel some pressure, or maybe that could get to you. Pitt tested themselves. This is a team to test yourself against. Not a perfect team in the Mountaineers. They're good, but flawed. Like Alan perfectly analyzed this team. They lost the rebounding battle. Pitt won that rebounding battle pretty convincingly. So Pitt's size should do that most nights. If they could shoot, they actually could do something this year. And the Mountaineers, they looked solid in terms of the guard play for sure. They looked great defensively against Oakland, maybe a little bit lesser in this game, and Pitt just being so bad offensively, that was able to be an advantage for WVU overall in the stat sheet. And again, they need to figure out how to rebound. If they just do not figure out how to rebound, then I don't see how they're going to have deep tournament runs, even if they do have strong guard play, and that usually does give you an advantage in the tournament. But as Alan alluded to, yeah, a little easy schedule coming up, and then it gets really, really difficult in that tournament. They could face some tough tests. They're probably going to lose some of those games. Who knows? But that'll be a nice gauge of this team early on in the year. Pitt has a chance to pick up that first win of the season on Tuesday against NC Wilmington. Then Towson, you're feeling like they should get a win or two next week for the Panthers, which is what you want at this point. Everything going around in and around this program, they want a W, so they can feel good after this game. Capel seemed like he sounded like they should feel good after this game, but hey, you got to get a victory to really feel good about a year, and that potentially should be coming for the Panthers. West Virginia wins the return to the Backyard Brawl on our Backyard Brawl post-game show. WVU wins it 74-59. The Mountaineers now 2-0. Pitt now 0-2. Go to Pittsburgh Sports Now, WV Sports Now for our game coverage, our game recap, our commentary, and our video reaction right here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. So cue up Country Roads as we wish safe travels to Alan, George, and Ethan on their trek up 79 north from their travel down 79 south. The Backyard Brawl. What more can you want in terms of college sports? You gotta love it. It's back. It's in full swing. The Mountaineers get a victory. Obviously, Pitt wants more from it, but I think that's a win for everybody for the return of the Backyard Brawl, even for maybe the losing team. You kind of knew they were going to lose. So a solid night out there in Morgantown. I'm jealous. I wish actually I was there in attendance as well to get back to my old stopping grounds. West Virginia does win it though, 74-59. Cue up Country Roads.